Today, we're welcoming back to BDA Baby Dr. Morgan Cutlip. We've had her on before to talk all about relationships, how to keep the romance alive after you have children, how to keep your sex life alive, which has always been a very frequently asked about question for BDA Baby. And I'm excited to welcome her back to talk about her new book, A Better Share, how couples can tackle the mental load for more fun, less resentment, and great sex. Welcome, Dr. Morgan Cutlip. When did your book come out?
It came out April 8th.
Oh my gosh, amazing. And what has the feedback or, experience been with releasing this book? Because it's filled with a lot of subjects, a lot of topics, fun, resentment, great sex. So what's it been like?
It's been really great. It was a quick turnaround from my first book. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of hesitant and just kind of nervous about what it would be like. But I wrote this book with this sort of secret agenda of wanting it to be really palatable for men. Like I wanted the men to read it. That was my secret desire, because if the men are reading it, then the women don't have to do the job of explaining all of the things. Mm-hmm. And it's been cool because I'm getting these messages like, it was sitting on my kitchen counter. I ran out and did some errands. I came home. My husband's halfway through. Like I never asked him. I never even mentioned it or hinted. They just see it sitting there. They're intrigued, probably because sex is on the cover.
Yeah.
And and they're reading it, and really good feedback from men. So it's just been really awesome to see that.
So big difference with your first book to this book. Both are really there to help couples in the craziness of parenthood, to help couples stay connected, deal with burnout, deal with resentment, also trying to maintain the relationship of being romantic partners and not just co-parents or friends. And I love that you put this book out specifically with the intent of really catering it to women and also really wanting to get men to take this book on their own and digest it. Was that something that became more important to you over just being in your practice or over time, or what was the real drive for that?
Yeah, when I have been just working with couples and then speaking with women in my community, one of the biggest issues around relationships in general, but specifically the mental load issue, is number one, my partner doesn't get it. I try to explain it and they still just don't really understand what it is. And so I'm working overtime trying to explain it to him. Mm-hmm. And if he does get it, it's not really in a way that promotes change. And then the second piece was that anytime I try to talk about it, my partner gets defensive. Mm-hmm. Or dismissive, like, oh, you have too high of expectations, or you're making it harder than you need to. Or it's this like hardship Olympics where it's like, well, I'm really tired too. Well, I'm really tired. Now you're like competing over who has it worse. Mm-hmm. And so I really wanted to target those sort of pain points with this book. I mean, there's a really big, Fair Play is such a big book on the mental load and mm-hmm. offers such a genius solution to the logistical aspects of it. But I think there's a relational piece that needed to be talked about. So I really wanted to really add to the conversation in that sense.
How do you do that with men? Because as you mentioned, women naturally gravitate towards your information and also just the information that you're putting out in a book like this of, yes, I feel seen in this book, or yes, I want to know more about other people experiencing this same feeling. If you're new to motherhood, if you're a seasoned mother, but how do you reframe that to making it really digestible for people's partners, or maybe allow them to feel less defensive when being presented with this information?
I think it's a few things. One is just the tone of the book. The tone of the book is really presenting the mental load as the villain in the story. So we as modern families are just up against such a relentless pace, the distractions of our devices, the pressure to always be productive. We're up against so many obstacles. And so I position it as the mental load's the villain. You guys are on the same team and you are up against this shared enemy. And I think that is one shift that really helps. I surveyed women for the book, over 500 women, and then I interviewed men and women. And so throughout the book, I offer perspectives of both partners. I think there are a lot of issues in our relationships that feel deeply personal, that actually are really common threads that can stem back to differences between men and women and how we approach relationships, how we approach problems, how we approach stress. And so if we can depersonalize some of these things, we can kind of enter into these conversations around change in a more productive way. So yeah, I try to lean into perspectives, really like position it differently instead of making the man the enemy, which I think is a big, really important starting point for the book.
I mean, the fact that you spent time interviewing so many women and also so many men, what were the biggest takeaways? And was there anything surprising to you with talking to so many people?
I think it was just mostly confirming. It's like you kind of feel like you're in touch with your audience and what's going on. I've lived a lot of the stuff I write about, so I feel really connected to it. But I wanted to make sure I wasn't just projecting my own issues or sort of summarizing in a way that wasn't accurate. So it felt confirming. The biggest things were the defensiveness is massive. That is such a big thing. It's almost universal.
For men?
For men to get defensive when they're approached about the mental load. And it's interesting because I asked all the men I interviewed, what stirs up defensiveness in you? Mm-hmm. And so that was interesting to hear. Things like, it feels like when she talks about what she does, there's no mention of me doing anything. Almost like it's negating all of the good that I'm doing, which is a big one. Another big one was, don't forget everything costs money. And so if you're in a more traditional relationship where he's the breadwinner, that was something that stirred up defensiveness. So I think that was really just confirming that this is a big pain point people really need some help with. Another was how a full mental load that is handled unfairly or is perceived to be unfair impacts sexual desire. I had seen research coming out on that. I had read the research. I knew it to be true from just like a relational therapist standpoint, but to see that come out of the interviews and the data was really, really interesting. A lot of women will talk about this dynamic where it feels like their partner becomes another child. And that is just not sexy, really, for either partner. So right. I think those were two of the biggest things that came out of it.
So when you get your friends together and you guys kind of have like this playful banter about maybe different ways that you would want your, significant other to show up, or you sit there and you're like, does he not get all the stuff that I'm doing, or I'm exhausted, or, can't he help in this space? But if he tries to help, then he's not doing it right. And it's like this, constant thing, which I'm sure that you're very familiar with. What do you say to women who feel like they're in that position of just like, I don't even know how to get more involvement?
The big picture thing is that the takeaway of the book kind of leads couples to a point where they're able to talk about the mental load without it spiraling into an argument, so that they can regularly have a meeting where they touch base on things. The reason why this is so important is because the mental load's always changing. It's like every single day there's new demands and circumstances of life that are added to our plates. And if we don't have a way of touching base about these things, it becomes a big issue because either women just soak it up. I joke that women are like the bounty quicker picker-uppers. Like we just like come in, we soak up all the stuff and we get incredibly saturated to the point where we start to crumble under the weight of it. So if we don't have a forum for discussing sort of the demands on our schedules and in our life as a family, then we likely will soak it up. So we have to have this. The other thing is that a lot of times women will kind of walk around wanting to have conversations around how things are done, what needs done, what's on the schedule, like a birthday party's coming up, who's doing what, all of these things kind of build up. But if we don't have a place to regularly talk about it, it kind of ekes out as these like little drips of information that either can make her feel like a nag, or can be really inefficient because it's likely to lead to miscommunication. So having a regularly scheduled time where you just touch base on what's going on, you evaluate what feels fair, what doesn't feel fair, where you each might need support in the week ahead, is like literally will change your relationship around the mental load. So that's the big picture thing that can make a really big difference.
I had a friend who told me on Sunday evenings she has calendar meetings. Is that like a weekly scheduled meeting?
Ideally, it's a weekly scheduled meeting. In the book, I give an agenda for it. So if you need kind of like guardrails, because sometimes these meetings can go in the weeds and that's not what you want. So yeah, weekly is ideal. You know that moment where you're like, we were having a great talk and now we're having an argument. I don't even know why. Yeah. Weekly is best. And it's like people get funny about it where they're like, that's so awkward. That's so weird. It's a relationship. I'm not doing a meeting. This is not a business. But we literally have meetings about every other part of our life. And isn't our relationship so much more important? And running a family is kind of like running a bit of a business. And so I just say, get over yourself, get over the awkwardness. And the more you do it, the more sort of routine and natural it will become over time.
I like the idea that also like getting over yourself with the idea of having a meeting, because yes, you have meetings, you know, and you don't want it to feel like your relationship is a business, but really you're in the business of, you know, raising a family and also keeping your family business going as far as like appointments, scheduling things, you know. And then, you know, one thing that I love about your book is also making sure that, yes, we have these meetings for how we can make sure our family stays on track and schedules stay on track. And also make sure you remember that your partner is not just your friend or your co-parent in this. And you want to remember that they're also somebody that you can be romantic and intimate with.
Yeah, and I think when you have these meetings, it actually frees you up to enjoy each other more, because you're not like carrying the weight around of having to bring up the conversation. You're not building up resentments and frustrations. You're actually having a place to let those kind of get aired out and get things taken care of, so you feel like you're on the same team, so that when you're outside of that moment, that like whatever 20-30 minutes a week, you actually can just sort of relax and enjoy each other. And I think that people don't really recognize that can be a massive benefit to having these meetings. Just to keep in mind, again, the book is filled with practical strategies and like formulas. It's like really, really practical. But I think something when it comes to the mental load is we have to really reflect on what we want to change. So a lot of times when we kind of we bring it up to our partners, it's almost like these little complaints. Like, I wish you would see it. I wish you would do more. Why am I the one who knows all the things? It's kind of these statements that express our frustration, but aren't offering a clear desired outcome. And this can be really helpful, especially men kind of like a set of instructions. They really like things to be clear. And so I think it's really important that we know exactly what we want. So like my husband travels every week for work, and so he can't necessarily share a ton of the load of the home life unless he's home, but he's in and out so much, so it's really tricky. So for me, what I need most is actually words of appreciation and acknowledgement of all that I'm doing. Like that becomes something that I need him to step into and to give me more. And the other thing, which is when I surveyed women, the number one thing they wanted was more initiative. And the second thing they wanted the most was more appreciation and acknowledgement. So I had to really get clear about that and express that to him in order to get that need met. So think about what you want to see be different in your relationship before you enter this conversation. So when they're like, well, what do you want me to do? You know exactly what to say to that question.
This is something I always talk with my other girlfriends about, but when it comes to scheduling your meeting to, you know, go over the week ahead, and let's say little things come up along the way and you don't want to be a nag with your husband or your partner, is that something that you should like, because you don't want to build up resentment. So do you keep like a notes file of like things you want to discuss, or like what is the best way to go about not building resentment by just saying I'm not going to bring it up, but also making sure that you're not somebody who's nagging your partner all the time?
Yeah, there's a couple things. So I'll share what we do in our relationship, but I actually like the notes file. You could kind of keep notes through the week and then touch base, or you could even have a shared notes so you can both kind of see in real time what you're adding to the list.
Yeah, you're like, I hated that when you just did that.
Yeah, it depends like how much you can handle as a couple and how thick your skin is. But I found, okay, so backstory, my husband used to joke, or not even joke, it was like a point of pride that he's a straight shooter. He's like, I'm a straight shooter. I'm just very direct. Like, I don't want to, I'm efficient in how I speak. And I was like, okay, which is not always awesome on the receiving end.
Yeah.
And so as I talk about this in my first book, but as I was getting more assertive with my own needs and what I needed in our relationship and around the house, I figured I could be a straight shooter since he was as well. And so I would just kind of like rattle off things that I needed, or like a list of stuff that needed done around the house or whatever. And I remember he would be like, oh, are you mad at me? Like, what's going on? And I think it's because a lot of us women, when we're sort of in this go mode, I don't know what to call it, but I think go mode feels most accurate, at least for me. We get really kind of like intense and kind of punchy. And that's usually when we have that list of things that we need to unload, or we need to talk about, or we need to discuss around schedules and logistics. And it's not always received well by our partners. And our intensity, I talk about this in the book, and they got to work on this, but our intensity can come off as scary to them. So they kind of pull away. So anyway, the strategy that we use is when I'm in that mode or he's in that mode, we touch base and we frame it. So I'll say to my husband, hey, I'm in go mode. I need to rattle off stuff to you. Are you ready? And he'll say, usually he'll be like, give me a second, and he'll kind of get in the mode. And he's like, go. And then I just click in to that. I unload all the things. I'm like, do you have any questions? And usually he doesn't. And then we kind of click out and we go back to our normal life. So it almost frames that interaction of sort of debriefing or listing things so that it doesn't seep into our regular interactions in the relationship. No one's wondering if someone's mad at each other. It's just kind of capturing that sort of moment. And that's actually saved us in countless situations of really dissolving into some sort of argument or miscommunication.
How do you recommend in couples to, when you talk a lot about just dividing the load and, finding different ways to have both partners contribute to the load of life. I have found in my relationship, like for Chris and I, there are certain things that he's amazing at, and then there are certain things that I'm better at, and we divide those up based on each other's strengths, and they might not be equal necessarily. Like, here are 5 things for you and 10 things for me, or vice versa. But what we've really figured out is like there are really specific things that he enjoys doing and also is very good at doing. And there are certain things that I really enjoy doing and that I'm better at doing. So we divide it up that way. Is that something that you recommend people doing, even though it might not be kind of like a tit for tat with equality amount of things?
Yeah, I think I personally like more fluidity in how we do stuff at home. So I think an important measure people need to consider is what feels fair. So it doesn't need to be 50-50, but what feels relatively good to both people. And so exactly what you said, I say in the book, which is what are you good at and what do you like to do? That's a really good metric to kind of think about as you're redistributing tasks. Like, I have a husband who will cut cardboard boxes up into like snowflake size pieces. I will never ever do that. I think it's like he loves it. It's his quiet time outside with a razor blade. I'll like chuck him off the balcony and it's like, yeah, that's your problem. So, I think we do need to consider, what do we like to do? What are we good at? I think also something to consider that I talk about early on in the book is I really define the mental load using a visual. And what this really is trying to show is how a single task with a mental load can unpack to have all of these sort of like micro tasks associated with it. So one line item actually might have a ton of things that are required to accomplish it. So many, many years ago, when my husband and I were sort of redistributing some things, I didn't really need to go through a lot of the details of what we do in our life. I just needed to hand over one giant thing, which was our finances, to my husband, because that unpacks to include a ton of stuff: paying the bills, calling the insurance company, handling our investments, figuring out college funds, all that stuff. That's up to him. And so I think that's something people can consider too, because sometimes thinking through going line item by line item of who does what is incredibly overwhelming and can really start to feel like a tit for tat conversation. And I think the other thing is like what you described is it's more efficient. If we all have to know how to do every single thing, it's like we're doubling up our energy and resources. So focus on what you like to do, what you're good at, and then talk about some of the things that should be interchangeable tasks. So it's like my husband needs to know what's required to get the kids to school, what goes in their lunches, all those things. We both need to do that so we can swap in and out. So there might be some of those tasks that are like mutually owned for more flexibility in your life too.
Okay, so we go through all of these different, steps during the day, steps during the week, just, keeping your family on a, path to success for the day, week, month, whatever it looks like. How do we avoid becoming friends and just co-parents and, make sure that we check in with our significant other on a romantic level?
I mean, I think one of the biggest is that when you enjoy each other and don't have resentment, it's much easier to sort of step into the things that help you feel more connected. So if you're handling this area of life well together, you're able to be safe places for each other to talk to. It's naturally going to feed into feeling more like a couple than you're going to feel like roommates or even a parent-child dynamic. I think too, it's really cliche, but we have to remember to have fun with each other. And I don't like to say cliche things, but it's really true. And we really forget this. We become very transactional, especially when we're in the busy season with kids, and very logistical instead of relational. And so there's all sorts of ways to incorporate fun in your relationship that becomes important. So, for example, my husband and I love comedians. So that's like, we'll watch a comedian. That doesn't cost hardly anything. You can find one on Netflix. You can you can laugh with each other. You have inside jokes now that you can talk about. You can go see one. You can play games together. We're both very competitive. So we like to do things that kind of like change that, it like kind of scratch that itch. You don't get a lot of that when you're parent to kids, so it's fun to do things like that together. So you build more shared experiences. You have more things to talk about when you're doing fun things together. And it helps you get to know each other and stay in the know with each other as you're in this sort of busy season of life.
And then, how do you even incorporate sex into it? Because it seems like since having children, you really have to be like, a different level of mindful with even scheduling sex or being intimate or, date nights, whatever that looks like for you. It's different once you have children.
It's very different.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, the whole book kind of like, I don't know how to say these things without like making it like innuendos that are unintentional, but like the whole book kind of like culminates to this chapter on sex at the end, because I really believe that sex starts outside the bedroom, especially for women. And so part of an enjoyable sex life is feeling really good in your relationship, because sex is vulnerable. Sex requires you just like really opening yourself up to somebody else. And so if you feel like, I can't even come to them without them getting defensive, or I can't rely on them because they don't actually follow through when they say they're going to do something, especially for women, we're not going to feel safe engaging in that part of our relationship. And so the better you take care of it outside the bedroom, the better it will be inside the bedroom. My husband and I had this talk like several years ago where he approached me on a date night. Nonetheless, I was like begging for date nights. We finally get this date night. He's like, I got to talk to you. I'm super pumped because he's not a man with a lot of words. Like usually I'm doing the talking. And I was like, yes, like tell me, what is it? And what he had to tell me was he wasn't that happy with our sex life. And it was kind of this record screeching moment for me, because I have the lower desire in our relationship. And so I keep track of how often we have sex to like make sure it happens. Because if I go based on just being in the mood, it won't really happen as much. And I remember sharing this with him, being like, I don't understand. Like we have sex kind of a lot, I think. I've like touched base with my girlfriends, like we're pretty good. And he said, it's not that it's not good. It's not that it's not enough. It's that it doesn't seem like you want me. So in the end, it was this enthusiasm issue. around our sex life. And I think a lot of couples actually, if you really boil it down, you really have a conversation around this, that actually is a big thing, is the men really want to feel desired. They want to feel like you're enthusiastic. We feel like sex is kind of like one more item on our to-do list because we're busy and it's a lot and we're giving to everybody and now our partner wants something else. And so it actually opened up this really big conversation for us in our relationship where I had to share with him, like, I don't feel your enthusiasm outside the bedroom. You know how hard I worked for this date night? Like, these date nights are foreplay for me. So, I need you to show enthusiasm outside the bedroom, and that helps me show enthusiasm inside the bedroom. And so it was actually a pretty big turning point for us in our relationship. And so it's important that couples understand that sex is relational. If your relationship's hurting, so will your sex life. If your sex life is hurting, it's probably going to trickle into your relationship.
When you were talking to all the people for your book, what were the big takeaways when it came to sex? Like, are people having a lot of sex, not enough sex? Is it pretty scattered?
So I didn't ask them how much, but the themes that came out were, one, I have no energy left for sex. So that's one. Almost like their brains are too full. I remember reading somewhere for a woman to be turned on, her brain has to be turned off. So that was one theme. The second theme was that I resent my partner so much that I can't even access desire. So I'm so angry with them. How am I supposed to like turn it on in the bedroom? And then the third was that parent-child dynamic, which is really unfortunate and really common, which is that when she's asking for something in the relationship and he, responds in some sort of negative way, a lot of times she gets louder. And so she becomes the nagging mother and he becomes the child that she's chasing to make a change. And so over and over again, these like responses to questions of it feels like I'm just have another child in the house. Like, how am I supposed to be in the mood for that? Like, that's weird. So those three dynamics are the ones that really rose to the surface in the interviews and in the survey data.
One of the things we haven't touched on was the resentment aspect of it, because you brought it up when it comes to sex of, women feeling like, oh, I have all this built pent up resentment and that's why I'm not interested in sex. What do you advise women to do with the resentment?
So the resentment has to have somewhere to go. So just holding on to it and carrying it is going to weigh you down, and it will just kind of do that slow erosion of connection and warmth in your relationship. So you're going to have to talk about it. And I realize that this is sometimes really painful and frustrating because if it's met with defensiveness, it kind of shuts that conversation down. So in the book, I give so many tools for how to get through defensiveness with a partner. So it has to have somewhere to go. And the repairing of resentment is kind of two-pronged. So on the one hand, it's going to take changes in your relationship. But there are people where their partner will change, but they still can't seem to let go of the resentment because they're carrying it. So relationship changes will have to occur, and you have to talk about that. And I know that's like the least exciting and sexy answer to give, but that's the reality. The other thing is, though, is that when you are working on repairing the resentment, as an individual, we have to shift the narrative or the story we're telling ourselves about our partner. So if I've developed resentment and my story about my husband is that he is a selfish guy who does not care about how I work so hard to take care of our house, and then he starts to make changes, he starts to really step in, he's taking more initiative, he's showing appreciation, it's my job to shift how I think about my partner, what I focus on, and to let go of some of these sort of negative storylines that I kind of had on repeat in my head. And so resentment is a process to heal, and it takes both pieces to really get to a place where you're feeling free of it.
It's also like, romance changes when you are in different seasons of life. Like, I never thought that it would be a romantic thing to have Chris fill my coolant level on my car. He was watching at me yesterday and he filled my coolant level and I was like, thank you for that. Like these are the things that you're like, depending on what season of life you're in, romance looks different. It may have been romantic to receive flowers at some point, but now it's filling your gas tank and your coolant level on your car. So it's all good.
My coolant is always low. I don't understand.
I know. It really is. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I'm so excited for your book. Everybody, make sure you get it, A Better Share. We'll make sure to link it. And this is such an important topic. I know it's something that my girlfriends and I are always talking about is, how to communicate, how to, even the load, how to share it. So I'm so thrilled that you put it all in a book that's also digestible for men and women. So well done. Thank you.
Thank you.